that I hope theater continues for as long as humanity does, because I feel like it helps us retain our humanity and restore our humanity through empathy and the stories that are told.
Well, hey, I'm Grace with Music City Review, and I'm here with Denise Hicks from the Nashville Shakespeare Company, and she's done acting, directing, I think some adaptations, stuff like that for the past, 35 years now? From
Yeah, 34.
34?
Was it my first show with the company, with the festival, was 1990. So we're coming up on 34 summers.
Nice, nice. Well, this is really exciting. And then you guys announced a few weeks ago that I think in September of 2024, you'll be stepping down from the position you've held as artistic director, moving on, I think, to freelance and to other artistic endeavors you have.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is kind of a big deal. You've been super big in the scene for a very long time, and you've shaped probably much of Middle Tennessee's entire experience with Shakespeare, or certainly their introduction to it. And that's a really big deal. You've been a huge thing in the Nashville scene, just making arts available to the public, making it free, making it accessible, like just so people can hear about it and see it, and also literally accessible. You park, you walk into the park, and then you sit down and, it's happening.
Suja.
Yeah. So, like, looking back on all of that, this is kind of a broad question, but what's kind of one of a takeaway you have from this whole time, just in terms of artistic endeavor in Nashville through the 90s to today? Any big takeaways?
You know, making theater is really hard. Like, it's to make it excellent and to raise enough money to pay people a decent wage, and then to let people know it's happening. All of the above. It's a lot of work, but I have never ever lost faith that it really does make the community a better place. So my takeaway is that I hope theater continues for as long as humanity does, because I feel like it helps us retain our humanity and restore our humanity through empathy and the stories that are told in theater. So that's my takeaway is also what I'm leaving, which I hope is just the faith in performing art, and also, dance and live music and everything. When art happens with an audience, it keeps us and our spirits alive. So I'm really hoping that it just keeps going forever.
Well, I think so. I'm almost 30, and I see a lot of people in my age group and younger. They want to go to something that's live, that's something that's an experience, because you have so much stuff accessible online that it gets overwhelming, and there's too many different things. And it's just cool to be in a room or an outdoor space, and it's somehow much more impressive and leaves a bigger impression on me. You can watch like a John Wick movie, and this guy shoots 84 people in it, and you're like, oh, okay, like that was a cool jump or whatever. And
Yeah,
then,
sure.
you're at a play and someone shouts, and you're like, oh my gosh, that man just shouted at her. Like, oof, this is
That's
intense.
it. Yeah. Even live magic, like
Yeah.
Jason Michaels is a local magician who, every time I see him perform his magic, I believe in magic again, and that, like, nothing, what Jason's sleight of hand cannot be displaced by CGI or AI or any eye, because, or just like our own human intelligence is what magic and the magic of any live performance provides for us. So I totally agree that people need to continue to experience real life to appreciate why we're here at all. People always, like, it used to be the big question is like, what's the meaning of life? Or we're searching for meaning or whatever. The meaning is in every moment, so you don't have to look very far if you're really here and now and present. And that's that back to the art of theater. That's what the art of theater is about for me.
Well, I have a question about just a little bit of your biography. So, from what I know of you, is you've been the artistic director of the Nashville Shakespeare Company, but I assume you weren't born that. So, like, where were you born? What did you study? How did you get into like this particular scene?
Yeah, and it's the Nashville Shakespeare Festival because
Oh, that's right. That's right.
there is a there's a there's a Tennessee Shakespeare Company and there's a Nashville. Wait, oh well. Anyway, we're the Nashville Shakespeare Festival, which
Festival.
definitely I have worked for the Tennessee Shakespeare Company, which is in Memphis, and it's an
Oh,
awesome sister company that I love as well. Yeah, you know, honestly, I was never wanting to be an artistic director at all. Like all I've ever wanted to do is just be an actor in an ensemble and make art collaboratively with designers and choreographers and writers and other people. But it just came about that I I was born into a creative family. My mother was extremely creative, both musically and visual art. She was an assistant director in a traveling like vaudeville minstrel show that during the Vietnam War, and we entertained veterans in veterans hospitals. And in those hospitals there were veterans from the First World War, Second World War, Korea, and Vietnam.
whoa.
So I know, and here I was like 5 years old, and she put me up on a little box at a microphone and said, "Sing," because if you can make their lives better, even for 1 hour, you've done a good day's work. So my mother taught me that performance is community service, really, and it's just you do it for your community, not for yourself. You do what you can to alleviate suffering in general. So that's what I learned from childhood, and we did that show I did it from the time I was 5 to 13 in 1973 when the Vietnam War was when we pulled out of Vietnam. Then we just stopped doing those shows at that point, and I moved into. I just had great theater teachers, music teachers in both we call it junior high school. I had a great chorus teacher. I tried cheerleading a little bit, but my vocal coach said, "Don't do that anymore." So we'd lose our voices every football game. So I did more music and vocal music up until high school, and even then we were doing musicals. But I started getting more and more interested in straight theater in high school, and then when I got to college in Pittsburgh at Point Park University, um, I had like a musical theater minor, but I was really focused on straight theater more and more. And I had great dance teachers at Point Park, and did some musicals there too. Opryland came to the Pittsburgh Playhouse, which was associated with Point Park, and had their auditions. And a friend who played piano, he said, "Come on, come sing for them." And I did, and they hired me. So I moved to Nashville, and I was in the middle of my junior year, and I didn't want to go into debt anymore because I knew I was going to be an actor, and I knew that debt wasn't something I wanted to carry into my adult life. So my professors there said, go, you can get your degree anytime, take the job, get the experience. So I moved here to Nashville and just fell in love with this city and the environment and the people and the culture and everything. So it was just fortuitous that my director from Opryland was also the director for the Barn Dinner Theater. So he cast me in Oklahoma, and I got to tour because the Barn Dinner Theater used to be one of many theaters in a conglomerate of some kind of dinner theaters. So we would play a month here and then go a month to East Tennessee and a month in Memphis and a month up in Indiana. And that was awesome. And then in 1982, Mac Perkle Southern Stage Productions, which became Tennessee Repertory Theater, which became Nashville Repertory Theater. And that my dream from college on was to be a member of a repertory theater company. So that happened when I was 22 years old. I'm like, well, what happens when all your dreams come true when you're 22? But it was all great, and I just found myself really committed to this community and to the arts here, and to especially theater, but any kind of live performance is good for the community, I think. So that's and then so from the rep we started Dark Horse Theater because we were doing a lot of big commercial stuff at TPAC, and we wanted a place where we could do more experimental and new plays. And Dark Horse was like our second stage for a while. And I got involved with the Shakespeare Festival because I had been doing Shakespeare with the rep. Like I had played Juliet and Ophelia, and knowing that Nashville had a Shakespeare Festival was really exciting to me. And so I ended up working the Shakespeare Festival every summer. And I don't know, at some point we were a collective, Dark Horse, and the Shakespeare Festival became like an artistic collective. And I said, we really need an artistic director. We just need somebody to really focus everything that everybody is bringing to this table. And that's how I got the job.
Okay.
and that was like 1998. So I've been doing it a long time. I took 2 years off to homeschool my son in a camper. Two summers off, actually, not two consecutive summers. I took the summer of 2002 and the summer of 2004 off because I was just focused on him and homeschooling, and I don't know, it was my version of a midlife crisis, I guess. And we went camping and had a great time. But I ended up coming back to Nashville and coming back to the festival. The artistic director that had replaced me didn't work out, and they said, "Would you come back?" And I said, "Sure." So we sort of count that I've been artistic director since 2005 because that was really the year I came back.
Okay.
It's a long story, but it encompasses 63 years. So
That's a good story. That's crazy. 22, you're like, well, I've checked all the boxes. Like, what next? It's a good problem to have.
It's all I really wanted to do. And Mac Perkle, who formed that company that's now Nashville Repertory Theater, was doing just exactly the kind of stuff I really wanted to do, like new, he was developing new musicals, and he just had a really great vision for Nashville because he was a native, and he really knew what kind of theater company the city needed. So I was all in and really committed to that. I went back to Philadelphia for a couple of years, just again to see what else the world had to offer in the mid 80s, and worked in Philadelphia theater, which is a great theater town. But I missed Nashville, and I missed the rep, and I missed the people and the climate here. So I came back in. I guess I moved back here in 1985 or 86. And then I had my son in 1990 and really wanted him to, I wasn't going to move him around or anything. And he had a good upbringing here in Nashville.
Nice. Well, I kind of wanted to, I had so many questions I want to do with you, but
I just took up all the time with my life story.
No. We want to hear that. But I was curious if you could kind of talk us through how you go through a production of, you say you pick how do you pick your play? And then how do you go, oh, I think the setting will be, 1970s, era like last summer or, and then if there's any big differences between the way you did it in 1991 and the way you did it in 2017, just stuff like that.
Sure, sure. Um, yeah, I I I have really I'm so in love with Shakespeare. I just love everything about those plays and that poetry and uh even the the troublesome parts, the problem plays and the just he is a such a observer of humanity, and I feel like he those plays call us out uh, where we have biases and prejudices and celebrate where we are able to overcome them. Um, he shows us that that greed and ambition and jealousy have consequences. Like I just love everything about the plays. So for me, the process of choosing a show and deciding on a concept or a setting for it is all about the now, like what are some of our greater challenges in 2020, whatever year it is. 2023, choosing Much Ado About Nothing was because people have been so tired of worrying and anxiety. And I thought we really need a comedy. And we really need a comedy that says, hey, don't worry about it. Everything's going to work out if you just trust and listen and love. So the last time I had directed Much Ado, or it wasn't the very last time, but the last time I directed it for the festival outdoors, we set it in 1945, like just after the Second World War, and we made it kind of like a real Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney kind of musical, and turned out beautifully. And I was so pleased, and just got the greatest cast, and everything about that production was great. So then, when it's time to do it again, you really have to clean the blackboard. Like you have to wipe the slate completely clear and then just go back to the text again and look at that play. What does it have to say? Why do people love it? What does it have to offer a contemporary, meaning right now, audience? So the 70s came up because at the beginning of the play, the guys are coming home from some war, who knows? And I looked at Vietnam, 1973, which was exactly 50 years ago. And then the other social and political implications of the time, even economy, even environmental concerns. In 1973, they were all the same as they are in 2023. So I felt like that resonance was definitely worth exploring. And then, the styles of the time, it was just so much fun to it was actually so many of the early 70s styles are back, like bell bottoms and I don't know, bright prints and things like that, that it made the show a little more expensive than it could have been, because right now vintage is in. And so it's a little pricey, but worth it. But anytime we choose a play for next year, oh, we haven't announced that yet. I can't talk about that yet, but it's always based in, I'll go back to like in 2008, it was a presidential election year, and I picked Coriolanus, which we had never done before and isn't done very often. It's a difficult play to do. But what I loved about it was that it does not choose sides. It does not say, conservatism is bad or liberalism is bad. It really indicts the people who are like moths to light, and they're fickle, and they'll just change their minds at the, if it, I don't know, the flip of a coin. So I really loved that Coriolanus is such an indictment of the mob mentality that I felt like it worked really well for that summer. I was really pleased. Mark Cabas directed it, and he did a really, really nice job. And we had Kamal Bolden was in that show, who's now gone on to be like a great TV star. So I'm like, it's really, I don't know. I look back on that particular summer with great fondness, and feel like sometimes the concept just lands right in the right place.
Security is my sword. Any more questions?
When the citizens turn against Coriolanus and banish him from the city, he says, "I banish you." And I love that, like, you can't fire me because I quit you. And then he says, there is a world elsewhere. And I feel like that is a revelation to these people. What do you mean there's a world beyond Rome? And sure enough, he goes out and joins the enemy and comes back and attacks us.
2013, Much Ado About Midsummer Night's Dream was set in 2013 Nashville. All 100% or like 98% recycled costuming. We really went with the whole climate change concerns, and it was just what was on people's minds that particular summer. That spring.
If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, while these visions did appear.
A fight had broken out at the steeplechase among the women, and like a knockdown, drag out fight that their boyfriends just took out their cell phones and put it on like the internet when these women were pulling their hair and breaking their pearls. So we put that fight in the play that summer when Hermia and Helena go to it. Lysander whipped out his cell phone and totally taped the fight as it was going on. But it was right, like that was Nashville that year. So I love it when we can, really just ring people's bells here and now with a 400-year-old play. So that's what's going on. It's not always, a lot of times it can be here and now. Cell phones don't always work in Shakespeare, because like in Romeo and Juliet, if they had cell phones, that play wouldn't end the way it does. But other times, you can really, really bring it to a contemporary time and place, and it still has great resonance. So did that. Then the adaptation process is really, I love Shakespeare's poetry, like I said, and his prose. I just edit for time. Like, I don't like plays to be longer than 2 hours. I don't like a first act to be longer than 1 hour. Because if it goes to 1:15 or 1:20, I might leave at intermission. I'm always like, well, that's enough. I've had a good night, So I like to keep the first act, if I can, under an hour and not let the second act go much longer. So the adaptation process is really just editing. Cut out the the jokes that don't really fly anymore because we don't use that kind of wit, or it's a local reference to Shakespeare's time that doesn't really ring with our audience. Or but I tend not to change the words. I just get the actors to use the language as if it's their own. And when you have really great actors like are available here in Nashville, that's not a hard part of the job at all.
That's great. So I have a slight question. I've always assumed that one of the reasons for setting a Shakespeare play in a particular time is not only that it's just fun, rather than having them all be set, sometime in Elizabethan eras or something like that, but it's also to make the costuming a little bit more clear to our eye. Because I know if I see some Elizabethan guy in a costume, I can't tell, like, oh, this guy's like clearly a bit full of himself. You see the feather that's like, because if you see someone with a popped collar, you can be like, okay, or there's so many different cultural references through that. Is that one of the main purposes?
Yeah, it is. It's, there's a representation on stage is important to us all. And we like to see ourselves reflected. Shakespeare himself said the purpose of playing is to hold a mirror up to us so that we can see ourselves. So when people are speaking with British accents and dressing in funny pumpkin pants and tights and things, that can be so distracting and distancing. So I feel like we have the power, we theater people have the power to create the world we want to live in. Like this last summer's Much Ado About Nothing, like that was a place I'd want to hang out all the time. I want to go to Leonata's. I want to sit on her patio and listen to the great band, and wear those fabulous clothes. So I love the opportunity to create those kinds of worlds. I have hired directors who have created more dystopian worlds, because I acknowledge that some people love that too. It's just not something I necessarily can create. It's just not where my heart and mind go. I tend to create. Even I directed King Lear in 2016. It was a play I had avoided all my life because I just didn't want to deal with it. But when David Landon was retiring from Suwannee, and I just knew he'd be a fantastic Lear, I decided it was time. And it was a tough play to direct, and it has just the most heart-wrenching ending ever. But I decided at the very, very end to leave Cordelia and Lear on stage. The rest of the cast kind of disappeared, and then they resurrected. Their spirits kind of came back, and they danced. They had the father-daughter dance they never got to have in life. And then that turned into a kind of a swirling of the whole cast as the whole cast came back. And that turned into a dance and a song and curtain call. So even when the play is like the saddest imaginable ending, finding a way to say, there's a cycle to life, and there is a circle that is that's spiritual and renewing ever with the human spirit is I don't know, it's just that's what we have the power to do, that in the theater, to do to create worlds and even universes in which we choose to live, we want to be. It's just this planet, as you well know, is a really tough place to live, and there's just some hardships here that I feel like we in the theater really need to alleviate when we can.
Nothing will come of nothing.
Art thou mad, old fellow?
Stand,
Oh,
rogue.
sir, you are old.
Do you know
His
me?
countenance
will be
assumed.
Let him smell his
How
way
shall I
to
live
He
and
cannot
work
be
to
such a
match
monster.
thy
Wisdom
goodness?
and goodness to the vile seem
I'd rather be any
vile.
kind of
For
thing
the
than a
oppressed
fool.
king am I cast down.
Let me not be mad. Not mad.
Well, that kind of leads into a question that I had, because I was looking over on your website that has, or the Shakespeare Festival's website, it has kind of every play y'all have done and which year it was. And I mean, Shakespeare wrote so many plays, and so many of them are like, oh, you have to have, seen this one or read that. Like, there's all of them are big hitters. But I noticed there weren't as many of the historical plays, and I saw like Hamlet and Macbeth pop up a bunch, and I think Othello, yeah. King Lear, oof, yeah, that one it's good, but it's so miserable the whole time. It's just rough. So like, do you try to go for like lighter or more big name stuff, or you go for the things you like, or are you trying to aim for like an audience seeing this as like outreach for Shakespeare? And I don't know. I was just curious.
Yeah, it's super tricky because there are only a few popular titles. Like, we could do Midsummer Night's Dream every year and people would probably come, and maybe we should, like like the ballet does the Nutcracker. Maybe we should be doing Midsummer Night's Dream every year, along with the other. Last year, 2022, we did Cymbeline, which is lately companies have started producing it more, but for a long time, nobody even heard of it. But it's a fun fairy tale, so we haven't done the hit, like we haven't done King John, which I think is a very interesting play, certainly an interesting character with some really good, strong, just fascinating people in it. But that story is not as familiar to Americans as it is in England. So that's kind of prevented us from doing it as often. I made Richard III into a vaudeville musical several years ago, and it worked really, really well as in that format. And I've been trying to do it ever since, but we had it planned for the winter of 2020. Nope. I mean, the winter of 2021, 22 didn't happen. I just finally gave up on it. But Richard II we did with all women as a co-production with Lipscomb University, and I fell in love with that play. Like, they're awesome plays. It's just hard to, when you're also trying to pay everybody, you have to do shows that people will come and see. And sometimes that means comedy, or well-known tragedy like Hamlet or Macbeth. But
for God's sake, let us sit upon the ground and tell sad stories of the death of kings. How some have been deposed, some slain in war, some haunted by the ghosts they have deposed, some poisoned by their wives, some sleeping, killed, all murdered. For within the hollow crown keeps death his court. What must the king do now?
The Nashville Shakespeare Festival and Lipscomb University present Richard II.
We did Antony and Cleopatra one summer, which I thought people would flock to because it's a well-known title, but not done very often. And that was a lower attendance summer for us. I don't know. That one didn't really hit the way I had hoped it would. So we do take some chances with our choices. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. Shakespeare Festival is a pretty small company, relatively speaking. So one flop can hurt us. Like, it's hard. We can't take huge risks with it, because it's really, it's the community sustains that company with their donations. And if they don't show up, or they don't, for whatever reason, don't like our choices, then it can really injure the company. So we've got to continue to maintain a diligence about pleasing as many people as we can. My mom said, I guess Abraham Lincoln, or maybe my mother said Abraham Lincoln said, you can please all of the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but you can't please all of the people all of the time.
Yep, that's definitely true.
Did Abraham Lincoln say that, or did my mom make that up? I wonder.
It's plausible. He said a lot of smart things, so I'd count that. Well, we're running out of time. I still had a bunch of questions I wanted to ask you, but I really appreciate you chatting with me, chatting with Music City Review, and just talking about your experience with the Nashville Film Festival, and kind of letting us in on how you start, getting a play ready to go and perform, and all of that. So thank you so much for what you've done with us today, and just what you've done for 30 plus years just in the Nashville art scene.
Well, thank you for helping us get the word out and keep interest in art because it slips by just like life. Theater is a very ephemeral experience because it happens and then it's gone forever. And so, you can videotape it, but it's not going to be the same thing as actually being there. So
Yeah.
we really, really appreciate all that you're doing. I'll speak on behalf of all the theater people in Nashville because we really appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face,